Welcome to Lingua Latīna tutorials with Mr. K, Pensum D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in chapter 45 of the Lingua Latīna series. This video is meant to accompany the Latine Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensum D worksheets available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. Let's get into the text and look at our new features, starting with line 8. We'll start here with custodibus. Custodibus armatis corpus saipsit, neque ad ius regni quicquam praetervim habebat, ut qui neque populi iusu, neque auctoribus patribus regnaret. So after he, with armed guards, he surrounded the body, for he did not have anything, or for there was not any right for his ruling, or he wasn't ruling justly. There wasn't any right for his ruling. He had no right for his ruling except for force, so that he neither was ruling by the will of the people, nor with the senators as his supporters. And so you see here also that ut qui can mean cum. So he didn't have any right except for force for his rule, since he was neither ruling by the will of the people nor by the senators, or with the senators as his supporters. So the new feature here, you've seen ablative absolutes many times before. Here we have an ablative absolute where there is no participle, there's no verb with it. You're still going to translate it as the attendant circumstances. So while this is true, and he wasn't ruling while the senators were supporting him, or with the support of the senators. These ablatives, you can have ablative absolute just with a noun, as you have here with auctoribus. The next new feature is in line 16. And here we'll start with 15. Hic enim regum primus traditum a prioribus morem de omnibus rebus senatum consulendi solvit, domesticis consiliis rem publicam administravit, bellum pacem foedera societates per se ipse, cum quibus voluit, in iussu populi et ac senatus fecetur bitque. So for this guy, carried out his reign, or first of all the kings. For this guy, first of all the kings, got rid of, or loosened, dissolved the tradition handed down from his ancestors, the tradition of consulting the Senate about all things. He administered the state with his own private plans, or his plans from his own house. And he fake it, we got to go to the verb at the end, he made and broke both war and peace, treaties, alliances, all by himself, with whom he wanted to, with whomever he wanted, with a lack of support, or without the people or the Senate commanding it, or without the support of the people and the Senate. So the new feature here we have is we have consulendi. You saw that I translated as of consulting, the habit. He dissolved the habit of consulting the Senate, consulendi senatum. Notice that we have a gerund here with an object, and we've learned before that most of the time the Romans didn't do this. Most of the time, instead of using a gerund, which is an active verbal noun, of, here's the genitive, and only has the genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative forms. But here we do have an object with it, the Senate, of consulting the Senate. If we wanted to change this to the way they normally do this, the Romans would normally have senatus in the genitive with consulendi, so the habit senatus, the genitive, consulendi, of consulting the Senate, or of the Senate needing to be consulted. The next new feature is in line 59. Head to 59. And here we will start with, we will start up here with ea communa nocte perfecta essent, Tarquinius Paulo ante lucem accitis, ad se principus Latinorum moram suam hesternam velut divinitus ait, salutis ebi atque illis fuisse. We'll stop there. When those things had been finished in one night, Tarquinius, a little bit before dawn, with all the chieftains of the Latins, after they had been summoned to himself, he said that his delay on the previous day, hesternum, was or had been, as it were, a divine blessing for the well-being for himself and for them. Here we have saluti, a dative case. His delay was for the health for himself. Here we have the dative of purpose and a dative of reference, the double dative. For this, was for the well-being for himself and for them. The next new feature is in line 67. And here we'll start with ubi. Ubi et oventum est, turn ex somno excitatum, etc. So, literally, when there was an arrival there, they encircled Turnus after he had been woken from his sleep. So, ventum est, third person singular, perfect passive, indicative verb. But here there's no clear subject. It's used in an impersonal way. Venire, to come, can't have an object. So in the passive, there was an arrival by them. We would say when they arrived there, but understand that ventum est here is being used impersonally. So you have to add there in front of it. There was an arrival, or we change the subject to they arrived, when they arrived. The next new feature is in line 80. So let's move ahead. Okay, so we have haud difficulter persuasit Latinis quamquam in et foedera superiors Romana res erat. So not at all, with very little difficulty he persuaded the Latins. Although the Roman state was superior in that treaty, or was greater in that treaty. Haud difficulter. Difficulter is the adverb form for difficulus. Difficulus, difficult, the adjective. Difficulter, with difficulty, or difficultly, which we don't say. But with difficulty, he, with very little, haud difficulty, with very little difficulty, he persuaded the Latins. And remember that persuasit takes the dative, that's why you have Latinis here. The next feature is in line 94. And so here we have ubicum vendenda praeda quadragenta talenta argenti fecisset, eam pecuniam omnem ad edificandum Iovis templum servavit. Okay, so when he had made 40 talents of silver by selling the loot or the booty that he had gained, he saved that money, all of that money, for the building of a temple or the temple of Jove, or Jupiter's temple. So here, wendenda is a gerundive. You can see that it is acting like an adjective with prida. So it's by selling the loot that he gained in that war, by selling his booty. And remember the form of wendenda from wendera. This is the future passive participle in form, but it's called a gerundive when it is used as an adjective like this. And it is going to be it's ablative singular feminine future passive participle. If we were going to change this to the gerund form that we've seen a couple times in this chapter, by selling we're going to use prida as an object of wendenda, we'd have wendenda pridam, accusative, by selling the loot. In line 100, we have another new feature. So, nam cum velut posito bello, fundamentis templi accendis aleis urbanis operibus, intentum se esset simularet, sextus filius eius, qui menibus ex tribus erat, transfugit ex composito gabios patris in se saevitiam non tolerandam quaerens. I think we'll stop there. That's a long one. For when, just as if he was setting aside the war, just as if with this war set aside, when he was pretending that he was intent upon laying down the foundations of the temple and was intent upon other works in the city, Sextus, his son who was youngest from his kids or his tribe, his son crossed over, according to a plan, crossed over to Gabii, complaining that the cruelty of his father against himself could not be tolerated, non tolerandam. The new feature here in this long section is with Iachendis, and it is a dative case going with fundamentis, and it's intentum that takes this dative. Intent upon, intentus, you see in the margin, takes the dative. Intent upon Iachendis fundamentis, on laying down the foundations. Notice also that we have a gerundive here, Iachendis, with fundamentis, so it's acting like an adjective with fundamentis. And if we were going to change this around with a gerund and an object, we'd have Iachendis fundamenta, laying down the foundations for this neuter noun, fundamentum. The next new feature is in line 114. And here we will start with, we need expectando, so going all the way up, don't see expectando in this sentence. I think we're probably we're in the wrong sentence here. So I'm going to move ahead to line 118. And in 118, we'll start up here with filius. No, non mirantur si. Non mirantur si Tarquinius, qualis in cives, qualis in socios, talis ad ultimum in liberos esset. Sibi vero gratum adventum eius esse aiunt. Nam illo adjuvante brevi futurum ut apportis gabinis sub Romana Moenia bellum transferatur. So we have here, this is the people of Gabii. The people of Gabii aren't surprised if Tarquin, being such a way toward his own citizens, being such a way toward his allies, be just that same way toward, in the end of, ultimately, be that same way in liberos, toward his children. And here's them speaking. They say, that that his arrival was very his arrival was gratum, very welcome to themselves for illo adiuante, with him helping them. In a little while, they were saying that it would be the case that the bellum, that the war would be carried over from the gates of Gabii to the walls of Rome, or it would be carried be brought beneath the walls of Rome. So here, the new feature, actually two new features here. One is adiuante, adiuante being the present active participle, going with illo, with that guy helping them. This is the ablative absolute, and so we have the ablative singular masculine with illo because it's talking about sextus helping them out, with that guy helping them. And then the next new feature is, you see that futurum esse, this is all indirect speech. They say that that it will be, in a little while, it will be the case, futurum esse. So this is just our futurum esse, our future active participle from sum esse. And then we also have a subjunctive here, transferatur, a present passive subjunctive, and the from transfere, to carry across or over. Why do we have a subjunctive? Well, we're in an ut clause. What kind of an ut clause? Well, this is an ut noun clause, and it's an ut noun clause acting as the subject of futurum esse. So, for they say that that this thing, that the war is going to be carried over, that will be happening, that's going to be what's going to be. That's going to be what's going to be. Futurum esse. Remember that futurum esse is often replaced by fore, that it will be. And why, this is kind of an awkward construction, but it's a way of getting around using the future passive infinitive, which the Romans didn't like very much. Remember, the future passive infinitive is the supine plus iri, as you see in the margin here. Translatum iri. Remember the principal parts: transfere, to carry across; transtuli, transtulisse, to have carried across; and translatum esse, to have been carried across. Here, translatum iri, the supine plus iri, is how you say the future passive, that the war will be carried across. But the way the Romans preferred to say it here, we could say futurum esse, they say that it will be that the war be carried across. The next new feature is in line 128. And here we'll start with ita. Ita cum sensum ad rebellandum primoris gabinorum incitaret et ipse cum promptissimis juvenum praedatum iret, dictis factisque omnibus ad fallendum aptis ad ultimum dux belli legetur. So thus, when little by little, or after little by little, he was urging on the first citizens of Gabii, was urging them on to rebellion, and he himself, with the most eager of the young men, was going out to get loot, or to loot the Romans. After his words, after all of his words and deeds just right, aptis, for deceiving the people of Gabii. After that, he is chosen. At last, he is chosen as the leader of the war. So here, the new feature is the use of praedatum here. Remember that praedatum, when you have a verb of motion, and then this form, the third principal part, looks like the perfect passive participle ending in this is our supine, the first supine. He was going out to get booty. Praedatum. It shows purpose. What is a supine? Remember that it's a defective fourth declension neuter noun that only has its accusative and ablative forms. So it only has and oo as a form. The next new feature is in line 130. And here we have ibicum inscia multitudine quid ageretur proelia parva inter Romam gabiosque fierent, quibus plerumque Gabina res superior esset, tum universi Gabini sextum tactarquinium divinitus tibi missum ducum credora. So there, while the majority didn't know what was going on, literally with the majority not knowing what was going on, there some small battles, parva proelia, were being conducted between Rome and Gabii, in which, excuse me, for the most part, the state of Gabii, or the city of Gabii, was greater. Both because of that, and then the whole people of Gabii, then the whole people of Gabii believed that Sextus Tarquinius had been divinely sent to them as a leader, ducem. So the new feature here in this section is inscia with multitudine. And so here we have another example of an ablative absolute with in a noun form. We have an adjective with a noun with the multitude not knowing. Remember that the ablative absolute just shows the attendant circumstances. So while this is true, while the multitude doesn't know what is going on, some battles were happening. And what didn't they know? They didn't know that Sextus was playing them this whole time, that he was tricking them into believing that he was trustworthy and that he was going to help them lead them to victory over Rome. The next new feature is in line 140. So here we have huic nuntio quia credo dubiae fidei videbatur nihil voce responsum est. So to this messenger, huic nuntio, no response was made with his voice, or he said nothing. Literally nothing was responded with the voice. Why? Quia, because I believe, this is a parenthetical statement by Livy, because I believe that he seemed to be of a doubtful trustworthiness. Or we would probably translate this as, because I believe he seemed to be untrustworthy. But literally here we have a genitive case of fidei, from fides, of a doubtful faithfulness is the genitive of description here. So fidei is genitive singular feminine from fides. In line 142, we have, we'll start with rex velut. Rex velut deliberans in hortum aedium transit, sequente nutio filii. So the king, as if he were mulling things over, or considering things, crossed over into the garden of his house with the messenger of his son following him. Here we have an ablative absolute, sequente nuntio, with the messenger following him. Sequente, remember, comes from sequor, sequi. This is a deponent verb. But deponent verbs, when they become a participle, the present, they have an active form, as you have here, with the messenger of the son following him. They actually do have the present active endings. Here it's unte, the ablative. The next new feature is in line 166. And here, go up a little bit. Okay, so here we have, we'll start with This is a long section, but we'll start with qui. Qui labor cum militiae adoretur, minus tamen plebs indignabatur se templa deorum aedificara manibus suis, quam postquam ad alia opera specie minora, sed labores aliquanto maiores traducebatur, velut ad foros in circo faciendos cloacamque maximam subterra agendam. So this labor and this work was being added, or when this work was being added to the army, to the soldiers, still the plebs were less indignant that they were building temples of the gods with their hands. They were less indignant about that than they were afterwards when they were building minora opera, works that were lesser in significance to the others, but were by some degree, but were being brought out by some degree of a greater labor. So they were harder. It was harder work to do these lesser works that weren't as impressive or as respectable. Like, and here are the works that it's describing, like making the seats in the Circus Maximus, and like making the Cloaca Maxima that was going underground. So digging out the Cloaca Maxima, the sewer. So the new feature here in 166 is faciendos, and faciendos is with odd, shows purpose, to make the seats in the circus and to make the cloaca underground. This is the gerundive with foros. Remember, you know it's gerundive because it is it matches the ending os. If we were going to try to change this to a gerund, we would have ad foros faciendum, because the gerund only has its singular forms. But the Romans did not use ad plus the gerund and an object, so it would always be changed into this gerundive form. So you would not ever get ad foros faciendum. Instead, you'll always get ad foros faciendos to make the seats in the forum in the circus. The next new feature is in line 185, and here we have starting with quo postquam ventum est perfectis patris mandatis cupido incessit animos juvenum sciscitandi adquem eorum regnum Romanum esset venturum. Okay, so here we have another impersonal use of venire, to come. After there was an arrival there, literally, after there was an arrival there, or after they arrived there is how we'd say that, with the commands of their father having been finished, or again, after they finished their father's orders, or what their father had commanded, this is our ablative absolute, desire of asking, of the desire of asking this question filled the spirits of the young men, or filled the minds of the young men. The desire of asking to which of them was the Roman kingdom going to come. So the new feature here is we have the cupido sciscitandi, the desire of asking. Here we have an example of a gerund, sciscitandi, acting as a partitive genitive of cupido, the desire of asking. The desire of asking filled the spirits of the young men. Remember that the gerunds have an active sense, right? The desire of asking this question. So the question acts like kind of like an object here. The next new feature is in line 190. And here we have Tarquini ut sextus qui Romae relictus fuerat, ignarus responsi expersque imperii esset, rem summa opetacere jubent. So the Tarquin brothers, or the Tarquins, and we have to go, our main verb is here, they order that the matter be kept silent with all of their effort. So they're really going to try to keep this silent. Why? Ut sextus. So that Sextus, who had been left behind in Rome, might be ignorant of the response of the oracle, and be kept out of ruling, or kept out of his imperium, or literally be lacking of his imperium. Here we have two genitives, responsi and imperii, and these two genitives are with special adjectives. These special adjectives are, I'll call them pai adjectives. The pai adjectives are peritus, skillful, inscius, not knowing, prudens, clever, with something, ignarus, not knowing, and expers, lacking or not having a part of something. So, not knowing the response, ignorant of the response, here's our genitive with a pai, and lacking power, or not having any part in ruling or in the empire, expers is one of the pais plus imperii. The next new feature is 190 in line 197. And here we have reditum inde Romam ubi adversus rutulos bellum summa vi paramatur. Literally, there was a returning thence from there to Rome. But we would say they returned to Rome, but notice that reditum est is missing here, but it's implied. Reditum est means redierut, they returned, but it's impersonal and passive. They returned from there to Rome, where war against the Rutuli was being prepared for with all their strength. The next new feature is in line 226. And here we have, we'll start with ibi sextum Tarquinium mala libido Lucretiae per vim stuprandai capit. There, a terrible desire of raping Lucretia grabbed hold of Sextus Tarquinius. So here the new feature is Lucretiae stuprandai. Notice that we have a gerundive here of raping Lucretia. If we had put this into a gerund form, we'd have stuprandi Lucretiam, of raping Lucretia. Stuprandi here, because remember the gerund only has neuter forms, so it only has in the genitive only the long I, stuprandi, and then Lucretiam would be its object, stuprandi Lucretiam. But instead, we have the desire of raping Lucretia, Lucretiae stuprandai. And notice here also that this is acting as an objective genitive with libido, desire of doing this. The next new feature is in line 251. Going to 251, where we have, we'll start with, this is a long section, and we'll just start with Lucretia. Lucretia maesta tanto malo nuntium Romam eundem ad patrem ardeamque ad virum mittit, utcum singulis fidelibus amicis veniant, itta facto maturatoque opus esse, rem atrocem incidisse. So Lucretia, in grief, she sent a messenger with the terrible news, she sent a messenger, the same messenger, eundem nuntium, to Rome, to her father, and she sent the same messenger to Ardea, to her husband, and the message was that with a few faithful friends, that they come with a few faithful friends, that thus there was a need for action and for speed, that a horrible, rema trokem, a horrible thing had happened. Here we have opus esse in this indirect statement, which is why we have the infinitive here, esse, that there was a need, opus esse. Opus esse takes the ablative, which is why we have facto and matoroque. These are the ablatives from the third principal part, the perfect passive participles from facere and from maturare, to hurry along and to do. But we'll translate these as there was a need of action, something needed to be done, and of speed, of something needed to be hurried along. The next new feature is in line 266. And here we have consolantur aegram animia vertendo noxam ab coacta in autorem delicti. So they console the woman sick in her spirit, or sick in her heart. They console her by turning away the blame from her who was forced, turning the blame onto the author of the evil deed. Namely, they're trying to make her feel okay because it wasn't her fault. She didn't do anything wrong. She was forced. So here the new feature is an avertendo. They console the girl sick of spirit by means of turning away the blame. Avertendo here is a gerund, and avertendo, and the object of it is noxam. If we were going to change this to a gerundive, they console her spirit by turning away the blame. We would have avertenda noxa, by the blame being turned away, or about to be turned away. In line 275, we have Brutus illis luctu occupatis cultum ex vulnera Lucretia extractum manentem crore praese tenis per hunc inquit castissimum ante regiam injuriam sanguinem juro, etc. So Brutus, while those guys are occupied with grieving, literally with those guys occupied with grief, he holding the knife, having been pulled out of Lucretia's wound, the knife dripping with gore, holding that in front of himself, he said, "By this most chaste blood in front of this princess's injury, I swear, and you gods, I make my witnesses, that I am going to do all this stuff. I'm going to drive out, I'm going to pursue, and I'm going to pursue Lucius Tarquinius Superbus with his evil wife, etc." The new feature here is the occupatis, the use of occupatis, another ablative absolute, with those guys, while those guys are occupied with grieving, or being, with their mourning. This is ablative plural masculine, with illis, talking about the other two men there with Brutus. The next new feature is in line 293, and we will start here with Moet cum patris maestitia, tum Brutus castigatur lacrimarum atque inertium quae relarum auctorque, quod viros, quod Romanos deceret, arma capiendi adversus hostilia ausos. So we have that grief, when the grief of the father, actually we have a bucumtum, both the grief of the father and then Brutus as the chastiser of their tears and of their empty complaints, and the author of seizing arms, uh, which was befitting men, which was befitting Romans. That him, Brutus, moves them against adversus, against those who dared those evil or hostile deeds. The new feature here in this section is the use of capiendi. So we have that Brutus is the auctor capiendi arma, the author of seizing weapons, or we call him the supporter or the instigator of seizing weapons or of taking up arms. The use of capiendi here it's a gerund form with the neuter accusative object arma of seizing weapons. If we were going to change this into a gerundive from the present active genitive neuter singular word here capiendi, we would have armorum capiendorum of weapons being seized. The next new feature is in line 298. And here we have, I think we could start here. We have Duce, Ceteri armati, Duce Bruto, Romam profecti. The other armed men set out to Rome, Duce Bruto, with Brutus as their leader. Another example of an ablative absolute with only using nouns, Duce Bruto. Duce from dukes, it's the ablative singular here, with Brutus leading them. In line 306, we have ibi oratio habita nequaquam eius pectoris ingeniique quod simulatum aream diem fuerat de ui ac libidine sextitarquinii, etc. We'll stop there for a second. So there, a speech was held in no way of that heart and of that nature which he had been pretending up until that day. A speech about the use of force and the sexual perversion of Sextus Tarquinius, about the disgusting rape of Lucretia, and about her wretched death, about the bereavement of Tricipitinus. So that I'll stop there. Because the new feature in this section is eius pectoris and ingeniique. So not at all a speech, not at all of his of that mind and of that nature which he had been pretending before. So here we have a couple of genitives which are genitives of description, which we saw a little bit earlier, and we also saw in the previous chapter. So both pectoris and ingenii are genitives of that sort, genitives of description, describing Brutus, because he's acting way out of his normal nature, because he normally acted like that he was mentally challenged, and now suddenly he's speaking eloquently and with great force and leadership, and so they're shocked. People are shocked. In line 325, we gotta go down to, so we'll start here with inter hunc tumultum Tullia domo profugit. in the midst of this tumult, or in the middle of this riot, Tulia ran out of her house, ran away from home, with men and women cursing her wherever she was going, and with the men and women calling upon the avenging Furies, the Avengers, parentum of parents. So here we have execrantibus, ablative plural masculine, going together with viris mulieribusque, with men and women cursing. When you have both men and women plural, then you use the masculine form of the, here we have the participle. So why is this, why do we have an ablative form for execrantibus? It's in an ablative absolute again. So with the men and women cursing her wherever she went. And then you see also ablative absolute with invocantibus, and with them invoking or calling on the Furies. The next new feature is in 334. Here we have duo patrem secutisunt, qui exulatum caere in Etruscos ierunt. So the two sons followed their father, and they went into the land of the Etruscans, or into Etruria, to be exiles in Caere, a city in Etruria. So the new feature here is exulatum. This is our supine from exulara. Exulara means to be in exile. So here with the verb of motion, ierunt, they went, and this shows purpose. They went, we got the motion, to be exiles, exulatum. They went to be exiles in Caere. The next new feature is in line 350. And here we have quantum animis erroris inest, parat inscia rerum, in felix epulas hostibus illa subis. So how great an error is in her heart, talking about Lucretia. She, not knowing what's going on, unknowing of the things that her enemy had planned, unknowing of things, she, the unlucky girl, prepares dinner for her enemy. The new feature here we have inscia plus rerum, not knowing things. This rerum is acting as an object of inscia. Inscia is one of those pai adjectives, not knowing, and it takes the genitive as its object. So not knowing things. The last new feature in this chapter is in line 408. And moving ahead to 408, we have, we'll start with fertur in exequias animi matrona virilis et secum lacrimas invidiamque tracit. So the matron, this is Lucretia, the matron is borne off to her funeral, the matron of a manly courage, animi virilis. This is a genitive of description. The matron of a manly courage is borne off to her funeral, and with her she carries along or drags along tears and hatred. This is kind of a hatred for her enemies, and hatred toward her enemies. So that is, those are the new features for chapter 45. Thank you for listening.